Hello, Miner fans, and welcome to this UTEP Athletics presentation. I'm John Teicher, currently, and even back then, the voice of the UTEP Miners. The upcoming 2023-24 UTEP men's basketball season will mark 40 years since the 1983-84 Miners put together the program's best season in nearly 20 and one of the finest in the storied history of the program. The Bear, Don Haskins, entering the 23rd season of his Hall of Fame coaching career, had seen his Miners emerge from one of the most challenging stretches in his time at UTEP in the late 1970s and had not seen his team advance to the NC2A tournament in nearly a decade. The season before, 1982-83, saw the Miners exceed expectations by winning a share of the Western Athletic Conference regular season championship and earning a bid to the NIT despite the absence of two starters, both of whom had been felled by season-ending injuries. With 6 of those players returning, plus the 2 that had missed most of the previous campaign, the 1983-84 UTEP basketball season promised to be a special one, and the Miners brilliantly delivered. The team opened by winning its first 15 games while achieving a top 5 national ranking. They would go on to win 27, the second most in a season in school history, taking Coach Haskins on a return trip to the NC2A tournament. It is my honor to introduce, in alphabetical order, the UTEP men's basketball student athletes of 1983-84, those that were able to join us for this presentation today. One of 3 Miner seniors on that team, he could really shoot it, from Los Angeles, known as the Saint, number 24, Anthony Bailey. He was redshirted during that memorable season, but went on to take part in 124 UTEP games, second most ever at the time, was perhaps the spiritual leader of the group from New Orleans, and for obvious reasons known simply as Soup, number 20, Wayne Campbell. He played a vital role, often in the middle when the Miners were in his zone defense. Following his playing days, he spent several seasons as my partner on the UTEP basketball radio and television broadcasts. From Houston, we creatively called him PC, number 43, Paul Cunningham. The Big Cheese, as he's known. He was a Miner sophomore, an impact player at both ends of the floor, to the extent that following his UTEP days, he went on to play several seasons in the NBA, completed his Miner career as the number 2 scorer in program history from Tucson, number 33, Dave Feidel. A junior at the time and one of the best distance shooters the program has ever known, it's my contention that if the 3-point field goal had been in effect at that time, he might have ended his Miner career as the top scorer in program history, yet he still poured in over 1,300 points. From Houston, the Pony, number 10, Luster Goodwin. Ham came to UTEP from the decorated Crenshaw High School program in Los Angeles. He was a sophomore coming off one of the most effective freshman seasons under Coach Haskins. Number 31, Kevin Hamilton. And the elder statesman of this group was coming off an injury that kept him out nearly the entire season before. As tough as they come, he would score nearly 1,200 UTEP points. He represented the United States in both the World Championships and the Pan American Games while a Miner, then was an NBA draft selection, and will be inducted into the UTEP Athletics Hall of Fame this September. From Houston, number 31, Fred Reynolds. Those that were not able to join us, unfortunately, on the call here today are Donnell Allen, Quentin Gates, Don Bronson, and Dr. Lemuel Clanton. And unfortunately, 4 members of that team are no longer with us. We lost Jeep Jackson shortly after he completed his time at UTEP. Coach Haskins passed away in 2008. Assistant Coach Jim Forbes, a great Miner himself, in early 2022. And most recently, Kent Lockhart. Also joining us is Tim Floyd, then an assistant to Coach Haskins, and the one that recruited all of these champions. Tim went on to be a longtime collegiate and NBA head coach, closing out his career right back here at UTEP. Gentlemen, to all of you, welcome, and it's great to have you along. Tim, let me begin with you. As I mentioned, you recruited all of these fellas. You recruited Jeep and Kent. You worked with both Coach Haskins and Jim Forbes, specifically talking about Kent and Jeep and Coach Haskins and about Jim. Tell us what they meant to you.
Well, Coach Haskins, obviously, it's been said many times, was the greatest influence in my career. The only boss that I ever had in my career, and hired me when I didn't deserve it. Taught me everything that I knew about the game. Became like my second father. My father had passed away when I was young. Learned to value things like sense of humor, defense, discipline, trust, loyalty, coming to work every day and demanding the best out of people. And, he was just a guy. I think all these players know it and knew it immediately after they left. He absolutely loved them and cared so much about what they were going to do with the rest of their lives. And I do know that nothing meant more to him in his career, including the national title, than hearing from guys like all these guys that are on this call after he left. And he was so proud of all these guys.
Talk about Jim Forbes and about Kent and about Jeep as well, if you would.
Jim was a part of the 70s teams that were so great. Member of the United States Olympic team, was a partner with me in the office trying to recruit all of these players. Gentle giant, great presence, great voice, kind, humble, caring man. Loved all of these players, gave his heart and soul to this profession and to all those kids in El Paso that he coached over all these years. In fact, I talked to a principal at Eastlake High School the other day who had played for Jim, and he had an impact on so many lives, but was a dear friend. Kent Lockhart was a guy that we recruited out of Palo Alto, California. Just knew that whoever played for Coach had to be tough. And I think all of these guys that are on this call were tougher than, any group of guys that I ever coached. I'm talking about to a man, every single one of them. Great character, great toughness. I would think that Kevin and Cheese and Fred and Wayne, all these guys would agree that if you couldn't respect Kent Lockhart's effort on the floor, then there was something wrong with you. If you couldn't respect him as a person, there was something wrong with you. Authentic, real, tremendous character, just a ton of fun. And I think we all feel a void because he spent his last years in Australia and we couldn't talk to him, couldn't see him as much, but had a great life, had an artistic flair. Cheese will tell you way more about him in this broadcast than I can, plus all these guys. But we loved him. And Jeep is one of the best basketball players that this country really didn't get to know. Kevin Hamilton got to see it firsthand his senior year in high school when Crenshaw had a 77-game winning streak, and I was out there looking at Kevin and Quentin, and they were a dominant team. And I think Kevin was the player of the year in the state of California. And Jeep's high school team of Gardena went in there and defeated Kevin on their home floor, broke the 77-game winning streak. And I remember the name, asked about him, and sure enough, he ended up with us and was one of the quickest, fastest, most explosive, tenacious, unselfish, gregarious, fun people and spirit that I've ever been around on the floor. Just a contagious personality.
Soup, I know you are probably as close to Jeep as any of the fellas. Talk about what you remember about the great Jeep Jackson.
Yeah, Tice, just like Coach Floyd just mentioned, it was his spirit that just, it was contagious on everybody. And I would add one player that recently passed that we forgot to mention is Mr. Jeffrey Robertson. And Jeff recently passed a few months ago. And but yeah, just going back to Jeep Jackson. I mean, Jeep was not only the type of player that will push other players on the court, but he had that personality off the court also. And he was just contagious to be around. I mean, he was a fun guy, fun-loving guy. I mean, and I got very close with his family also. And Jeep currently have, I think she's 35 years old now. Jeep has a daughter that he's never met. But she's a beautiful young lady, lives in Dallas. And every time I'm in Dallas for meetings, I try to spend some time with her. But yeah, Jeep was just a loving person. Loving teammate.
Cheese, as Coach Floyd mentioned, you probably were closer to Kent than anybody else. One thing I remember is back in your playing days, it wasn't just the two of you, but seemingly the entire team. You know, they talk about players receiving cars from their respective athletic programs. You guys were all riding around on bikes back in the day. Talk about Cheese, your remembrances of the late Kent Lockhart.
Yeah, no, before we jump into that, I'd like to just finish up with something about Jeep as well. You know, when I was a rookie with the Rockets, Jeep was a senior, and Bill Fitch came to me and he said, "Dave, I've been watching a lot of film on that kid, Jeep Jackson." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "What kind of guy is he? What kind of character is he? And what kind of player?" And I said, "Coach, I'll tell you this right now. You know, Bill Fitch was my coach with the Rockets. For those that don't know, but you know, he said to me, he said, everything we see about that kid, we really think he's going to be a good pro, and we're looking at drafting him." And shortly thereafter, Jeep passed, which was, you know, hard on me. I went home that night. An old friend from El Paso called me, and and it was on my answer machine. It was pre-cell phones, and it was a recording from Jeep. He said, "Hey Dave, I'm coming down to Houston," and not a lot of people know that, but Jeep most likely would have ended up getting drafted by the Houston Rockets that year. So that was a big disappointment for me, because I was like, oh, how awesome would that be to have one of my old minor teammates on that group. Anyway, I just thought that was important. I wanted to bring that up. But, you know, to talk a little bit about Kent, everybody knows my relationship with Kent off the court. But on the court, if you guys remember back in the day, we used to play a matchup, man-to-man, 3-2 zone type, but it had a lot of man-to-man disciplines in it. And I remember watching Lockhart on defense, and he was the master of defense. And, you know, early on my freshman year, I started lining up on Pony side, and I quickly learned that I wanted to line up on Kent's side because I didn't have to work that damn hard, because Kent was everywhere. And I just remember Pony and I were arguing one time during the game. "Well, Cheese, get out there and get that guy." And I'd be like, "Hell no, Pony, you get out there and get that guy." The next time down the court, from that game forward, I ran on the other side of the court where Lockhart was, because hell, I'd just have to stand around and save myself for the offensive end, because Lockhart was everywhere. So Coach Haskins used to yell at him in film session and say, "Hey, Lockhart, you look like a damn bird ready to fly away with them wings, arms going up and down." And so, here's a quick story as well. We were up in Colorado State playing. We're getting ready for that game, and Lockhart and I were roommates. And for those of you that remember, it was kind of like a courtroom or a court area, and there was a swimming pool, but it was enclosed. And so you could kind of walk around outside in the middle of winter, and you could get to the swimming pool and so on and so forth. So everybody kind of left their doors open. And I remember Lockhart and I were, standing there, we were both in bed kind of there. And then Lockhart was getting ready for the game. And he started this pop locking with his music playing. And I looked out the window and I saw Coach Haskins sitting in the courtyard. And so I kind of kept sitting there. And the next thing I know, I see the shadow of Haskins. So I kind of pulled the blankets up over me and pretending like I was resting. And there was Lockhart pop locking or dancing in the mirror. And he goes, and Haskins is standing in the doorway, and he goes, Lockhart, he's sitting there for about 3 minutes, and I'm kind of just, going, oh, this is going to be good. I can't wait to see what he's going to do. This is not going to end well for Lockhart. And I'm sitting there, and Lockhart's popping, and he's doing his, his little pop. And so I go to Haskins goes, Lockhart, what the hell are you doing? And Lockhart turned around, and boy, you got to give it to him. He was quick-witted. He goes, Coach, I'm getting ready to play defense tonight. And he's doing his popping and he's swaying and I go, oh, this isn't going to end well for Lockhart. He goes, then he turns around, looks at me, and he goes, well, Final, you better get the hell up and start pop locking because you don't play a damn bit of defense. I went, damn, I'm sitting here innocent. I still get in trouble. But anyway, it was something I just laughed for an hour after Haskins walked off and realized that, he just loved that kid Lockhart and what he meant to the team and what he meant to, a lot of us claim we're the hub of the wheel offensively, but Lockhart was the hub of the wheel defensively. He set the tone defensively every game. He was a competitor, and he took the second backseat to guys like Pony, myself, Fred offensively because he could do the scoring. He just didn't take that as his lead role. He said, I'm going to do it on the defensive end. And that's the remembrance of Lockhart besides all the good times we had off the court.
Fellas, which one of you would like to talk some more about Jeep or talk some more about Kent? Feel free.
I'd like to jump in. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, fellas. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things actually about both Ken and Jeep. Obviously, like Coach Floyd had mentioned, Jeep and I, we kind of grew up in the same areas, played ball against each other in LA a lot growing up. And thanks, Tim, for reminding me of Jeep beating us at Crenshaw and breaking our record. I appreciate that. Thank you. No, I don't want. I've been trying to forget that one for years, but with Jeep was just so tough, and because he, laughed and joked around a lot, people may have thought that he wasn't that serious, but when it came to playing ball, Jeep was all about it, and he made us better. He was, you guys have said it before, just so infectious with his personality, and you couldn't get mad at him, and if you did, it was only for a short period of time because he's going to make you laugh shortly thereafter. So, I had a lot of love for Jeep, a lot of respect for him, and the same was for Kent. And like I mentioned previously, Kent was my first roommate there at UTEP when I arrived, and, it didn't take long for me to realize the type of guy Kent was. You had to respect him. he demanded respect, and he gave you respect in return. And it was one of those things that, when we got out on the court, you wanted to play hard because, if you didn't, he was going to let you know. And you didn't want to be the missing link next to Kent trying to play defense and trying to get things to make things happen. And Dave just said it real well. Kent was able to score the ball, but he did what was best for our team. And he filled that void. And I think all of us did. We all kind of assumed what our roles were. We figured it out, what our roles were going to be. We knew who was going to score the ball, who was going to play defense. And that's why we excelled. And it takes a good group of guys to understand that and realize that and sacrifice, for the betterment of the team. And I think that's one of many reasons why we were as good as we were during that time. So, when it comes to Jeep and Kent, and I know we just lost Kent, but every time I think about Kent, I just smile because he was just the kind of guy that when you thought about him, you just smile because there's just so many memories, him and Jeep. So just much love to those guys and rest in peace, definitely. But, we were all just a kind of different group of guys that all had that one common goal. And it was just for the betterment of our team. And that's why we were who we were.
Saint, I know you had something to say, yes?
Yes, I just want to say it's such a blessing to see you guys. It's been, 40-some years, but if we were going to war tomorrow, I still want to go to war with you guys. I mean, we battled each other. We had some fun. We had some fights, but we had a good time. Jeep, yeah, that was my little bro. I loved him to death. He was, he was a funny guy. I was at a Watch Magicians camp this weekend, and I spent a lot of time talking about Jeep. And I'll tell one quick story. I was telling someone when we get dressed for games, everyone opened their dorm room and blast all this music. Most of us were blasting rap. Cheese and Kent may have been playing Beethoven or something like that, but we were playing rap music. And Jeep was listening to the Police and the Eurythmics, and they just laughed. I knew nothing about the Police and the Eurythmics, but every time I think of him, he makes me laugh. I miss him dearly, but I've never really been sad. And to ensure that I never went a day and without thinking about him, my youngest son, who's 24, his middle name is Hernell. And his girlfriend is pregnant right now, and Hernell will be some part of his kid's name.
Oh, wow.
If I could interrupt, is that child number 12 or 13?
Coach, I don't know what you're talking about. But just to mention about Kent, the one thing about Kent, you're talking about tough, hard-nosed. I actually spent some time at the pickleball courts talking about Kent, being from Palo Alto, Gunn High School. And I've actually watched, this is before his passing, watched some of the championship games that he played when he was a senior. And I didn't realize, who was that said something about Kent having the ability to score, because in high school, he actually was more of a scorer than a defensive player. He could really shoot the ball, but one of the hardest workers. I had the privilege of being around him and Juden. It didn't get any more tougher than that.
Hey guys, I want to throw one more thing in there about Jeep for these younger people out there that can't remember. Let's really put this in perspective. The people that saw you guys play, if they were 11, 12 years old, they're 54 now. So the younger group of Miner fans trying to know how great a player Jeep Jackson was. They know who Tim Hardaway is. They know Tim Hardaway's in the Hall of Fame. Jeep Jackson started over Tim Hardaway when Tim Hardaway was a freshman. If that tells them anything, right, guys?
Yep, you're right. Good point.
Right. That's right. And Tim came off the bench and played. How many minutes did he play? Probably 10, 12 minutes a game his freshman year, something like that. But I didn't want to interrupt you, but you guys pick it up from there.
I'm gonna just be piggybacking off pretty much what everyone said. Starting with Jeep, of course, as we all talk about Jeep, I don't think it's anyone. Those are the two guys that I think everyone liked them. No one could ever say anything bad about those two guys. The only regret I have is I only had the chance to play with Jeep when he was a freshman, and he didn't get too much playing time. But you saw how good he was going to be, what a great player he was going to be, and I followed him afterwards. I remember one story. We was getting ready to play against, I guess it was Michigan in the Sun Carnival. So, I was, talking, and I said, you know what, we're not going to lose at home, fellas. We're not going to lose at home. And Jeep was right there, and I thought I was, saying something real positive to everyone in the locker room. So Jeep says to the effect afterwards, no, we're not going to lose at all. And Coach Haskins agreed with him. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I'm the senior on this team, and you're going to agree with the freshman. Although he was right. But, that's just how he was. We hung around and just his energy that he had as a player. I just wish I could have played more with him. And I'd like to correct, someone said that, when we were getting ready for games, we were blasting music and from each other's room, and Kent was right across from me. And believe me, it was a lot of Stevie Wonder and Wind and Fire coming out of Kent Lockhart's room. It wasn't too many of those other groups. Kent was real deep into the rhythm and blues. I just tell you, and just listening to Dave Fidel, I think he was right, because we always enjoyed on defense. I love Kent being at the top of that defense on my end, because I knew he was going to work hard. And as far as we talk about, I think you guys talk about Kent not being a scorer. Well, you all need to look at that BYU game. I think he scored pretty well that game at the end when the fight broke out. I think that was his best scoring game right there. Kent did exactly what we always wanted to do.
He did it for you guys, didn't he? He did it for every one of you guys.
It was one of them things, I guess it's like the Palestinian and the Israelis. We didn't know why, we never understood why we disliked BYU. We just knew we disliked it. And Kent did exactly what we all wish we could have done, though. But
well, it's probably because they wouldn't have any blacks in the church at that time.
I'm gonna tell you a story. And I do say that, but I'm gonna go back. I got a chance when I was at the Olympic trials. I got a chance to talk with Devin Durant, and I never got a chance to really know him as a player until I got there. And probably one of the nicest guys. I couldn't believe I disliked him as a player. And I tend to like him when I met him for that first time. Just really nice, but I tell you, those were some, and fellas, unfortunately for you guys, you all aren't here, but people still remember our team. It's not a week, and I repeat, it's not a week that someone don't come or clients or talk about our teams and how it used to be and what an impact we had. And we took it for granted. What impact we had on the city. All we wanted to do was go out and win. And we had a great group of guys. I think what was so important and why we were so successful, the majority of us guys like myself, Dave Fidel, Kent Lockhart, Juden Smith, I think Paul, a majority of those guys stayed in the off season and we worked out together. I think that was key. And I know I was getting ready to go and try for those USA teams. It was nothing more rewarding for me to play knockout. You guys remember Dave Fidel, all those summers of knockouts? Constantly one-on, because I knew nobody was going to guard me as hard as Juden Smith and Kent Lockhart, or to guard someone as difficult as those guys. And it was an unsaid rule. We got together out on that court We didn't have to talk about what to do. We knew what to do as a team. And those things happen in the summers. And I think our greatest games were in practice because we had such a stacked team. I mean, we all talk about, oh my God, if Jude could just guard somebody else, because, you know, it was like Edward Scissorhand was guarding you in practice. And yeah, that was one of my most rewarding things was graduating, because I said it in the speech. God, I don't have to guard you, and he don't have to guard me anymore, so I can move on now. But I cannot. Most important, Coach, we cannot thank you enough. I've known Tim Floyd probably has known me more than anybody in this city, and I've always kept up with him, no matter where he went. Coach, I can't thank you enough because, you know, even though you didn't have to, you always would call my parents, and you were the first person I called when they passed away, because all they ever did was talk about you, and they really appreciated you always calling them. You didn't have to, but that was very, very appreciative on your part, and that means a lot to me as a player. And one last thing, I know you want to think about that. Guys, I had the opportunity before Coach Haskins passed away many times, and I had the opportunity to, you know, I would pass by his house and I would see his truck always at the house, and I would just go to his house and I have my boys with me, and I could just, hey, Ms. Haskins, how you doing? I'm just wanting to come and see how Coach is doing. How many guys can go and coach in that college coach's bedroom, and he's laying in there watching TV, and I'm going in there with my boys, they're about 4 or 5 or 6, and we're sitting in there and we're watching Westerns with Coach Haskins, and he got a chance to know my kids, and he used to always laugh with them later on, talking about, oh, how do you like playing for your dad? Ha, 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 ha. And because he knew it was tough. But I had the greatest relationship after I played for Coach than when I did playing for him. I think that was so important. And yeah, I tell you, the best decision I didn't make was staying in Houston and coming here. And I remember Guy Lewis telling me, I don't know if I've told you that secret, Coach, here. He told me, oh, I can't believe you're going down there to that desert. Nobody will ever know about you. Well, I think I did all right. And he lied, claiming he never recruited Ricky and I, but we knew. And but I can never thank all you guys. Thank all you guys, and thank you, Tim Floyd. And, you know, I had the fondest memories, had the greatest teammates.
Fred, that leads us right into what it was that I wanted to talk about next. And I want to get everybody's thoughts on playing for Coach Haskins and what he meant to all of you. Fred, obviously you've already spoken. Pony, let's hear from you. What was it like playing for Coach Haskins, and what did he mean to you?
Well, Coach was like a father figure to me. Playing for him, you know, he instilled toughness, discipline, and organization. And just some of my fond memories of playing for him was that he always taught the fundamentals, you know, of basketball. And I did not understand until I probably became a junior about the importance of getting back in transition, because he felt like if he could put a team in their set offense, and that would drive the shooting percentage down, and it would give us a chance to win. And I can just tell you, in education right now, education is huge on PLC meetings, and that's meetings that you meet with your grade levels and you discuss your plans and so forth. Well, Coach was so ahead of time that he had PLC meetings a long time ago, because working for him, and I'm sure Tim and them did this as well, every day before practice, during lunch, he would discuss the game plan or the practice plan. And I just think Coach Haskins was so far beyond his time when it came to coaching. I mean, he could prepare teams, he could prepare practices and so forth. And I did not understand this until I went to work for him, is that he would always tell us in meetings that this guy was getting too chesty. And regardless to whatever a player did after they had a good game, he was going to make sure that you didn't get too chesty and think that you were too good, and remind you that it was a team game, not just about one person. So I can just truly tell you, Coach Haskins, as well as Coach Floyd and you guys, you truly meant a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. And I am just so glad that I had the opportunity to meet you guys as well as to play with you. And I just want to go back and talk about Kent for a minute. Kent and I played in the backcourt together for all 4 years. We started from our sophomore year on, and that's when Fred and Juden went out, and really no one gave us a chance for winning the WAC that year. And we were very fortunate that I think we tied Wyoming for champions of the conference that year. And if it wasn't for Kent and Byron Walker, just to instill the toughness on that team to give us an opportunity to win. So I was very fortunate enough to play in the backcourt with Kent for all 4 years while I was there. And truly saddened that he's no longer with us, but he truly meant a lot to myself as well as you guys as well. The other guy, Jeep Jackson. Jeep was he was a tremendous spark on the team that I played on. I had the opportunity that morning when he passed, I actually picked him up and we went to the gym together. And Jeep was so excited about playing in the game at Fort Bliss. And it was a very tragic accident for him passing on, but he was truly a great guy and will always be missed.
PC.
PC. John, could I say one thing?
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing. I don't know if these younger fans have any idea how great these players were. I mean, I'm talking about great players. Luster Goodwin, I never coached a player other than maybe Saint, who's also on there, who shot the ball as well as Luster Goodwin. And look, sometimes that means that you're not guarding or won't pass it. I know Cheese probably thought they should have thrown it to him every time he was down there. but I'll say this. I felt a lot better with Pony firing it from 27 feet sometimes, Cheese, than you throwing up at okay, but he was a great player. Luster Goodwin, a great player. Fred Reynolds, a great. Paul Cunningham, a great player. John, we need to talk about. We're 15-0. 15-0 with
we're
Cunningham.
Going to get to that.
All right, okay, go ahead.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Yeah, absolutely. And talking about PC and Soup, and of course, Tim, you convinced Coach Haskins right around the time we're talking about now to in certain circumstances play his own defense, and particularly in the middle of that zone when Soup and Paul, because of their mobility and their great wingspan, played the middle of that zone. It was virtually impossible for the opposing team to penetrate into the paint.
That's true. They Soup and Paul were different but similar in that you just counted on every board, either on their side or on the other side of the rim, they were going to go get it. They were both quick jumpers off the floor. There's guys that can jump high, but they were quick jumpers, and they were multi-bounce jumpers. They could, ball goes on the board, they would bounce 3 times, tap, 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 and go back and go get it quickly. Both of them terrific shot blockers. Both of them covered all kinds of ground. Both of them were very, very unselfish. And like all of these guys that are on this call, and I don't want to disparage any other UTEP players that I've coached or been around, but an unspoken truth in athletes today versus this group in the 80s. People talk about shooting, rebounding, ability to pass, ability to dribble. Toughness is a skill and a trait. And Fred alluded to it with the pickup games. All of these guys would cheat to win. They would all cheat to win in these pickup games. They were competitors. They were fighters. There were some of the damnedest arguments you've ever seen in your life in pickup games. And I mean, guys would just try to destroy each other. And you don't see that today. The guys today are out there in the off season. They're not playing 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5. They're dribbling through cones. And they're workout guys. They're workout guys. And they should be playing the game today in yoga pants.
Oh my God.
Versus the competitors that these guys were. Paul, would you attest to that, or what do you
Coach,
think?
don't give me too much credit, because actually I thought the ball should have been coming to me. But, you know.
Hey, PC, Coach Haskins, and if you've got anything to say about Jeep and Kent, too.
Oh, please. Yes. I mean, starting with Coach Haskins, I mean, what an influence, what a motivator. And, you know, some of the things that carried on. I did a little AAU coaching through the years when my kids were coming up. And from my oldest son down to my daughter, I coached teams and had a blast. But I don't know, somewhere, maybe some Bobby Knight got into me, because I thought throwing chairs on the court. So anyhow, but I mean, it's just that, you know, my kids couldn't understand it, but it's just that fire Coach had about, and passion, it's passion that he had about the game and the intensity. So that was one of the things that, you know, carried over into me, maybe into my work career as well, you know, just a do-all, compete, you know, a fire about it. Coach Floyd, I got to tell you, I really commend you, because I thought always you got winners, you know, and that was one of the things that really, you know, I think all the guys that played on our teams had winning backgrounds. I mean, I don't know if that holds true for each and all players that you recruited, but, you know, you're the ringleader there. I mean, I thought you did a hell of a job of recruiting, and I can't thank you enough for it coming after me. I know, Fred, you had a lot of influence in on that also. You know, stalking comes to mind when I talk about the times you came by my house and tried to come tell me about UTEP. And, you know, you guys did a heck of a press on me. But still, it was.
So I felt you couldn't beat us in high school, so I said, "Come on and join me at UTEP."
I'm not sure about that. I was telling somebody.
I'm not sure about that either.
Well, I am. I got the tapes. They're a little grainy, but I have them.
All right, yeah, they're in black and white. But, you know, you talk about Kent and Jeep, and I think about those guys, and, you know, again, it goes to passion. You know, those guys, just high energy. I mean, you can't think about Jeep, and, I mean, the guy was always just upbeat, up-tempo, high energy, accepting anybody, and he got along with so many people. And, you know, two different guys, Kent and Jeep, but at the same time, very much alike. I thought, you can't find enemies on those guys. You can't find enemies of those guys. Just great people, high energy, always accepting. I mean, you know, and I'm not talking about just guys on the team. I'm talking about people among the city, the campus, at UTEP. Just, you know, those guys were accepting to all people. I mean, you don't meet characters like that always.
Saint, Coach Haskins.
Coach Haskins, go ahead. I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Saint, go ahead. Coach Haskins, what was it like to play for him? What did he mean to you?
Well, like I said, again, he carried over. He was such an influence, one as a coach, as a player of his, but I think he carried on in my life with, like I said, impacting possibly how I raised my kids, how I am as a family man. I'm not sure if that's safe to say, I don't know. But anyhow, even in my professional career, I thought he had such a great impact on just being tough. I mean, talking about going to work and coming to work and just getting the job done. I had a lot of success at Liberty Mutual over my 30-year career. And, you know, one of the top sales reps, one of the most successful reps, not to boast about it, but I think some of those things he instilled in us to be tough, to be competitive, to go after, get to work and I mean, compete. My whole work career, I think my wife had to tell me, she told me, she says, you compete too much. Don't compete with the kids. Let them just play. Well, I mean, like everything's a competition. You got to be good at something. So let's make it a competition. So I don't know. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it wasn't. But still, I think, just competitiveness and toughness is one of those things that always impacted me. And I thank him for it.
St. Coach Haskins, for you.
Yes, I'm going to tell the story a little backwards. I tell people I played for Coach for 4 years, but I really didn't know him. But around 2005, when we used to have the get-togethers at UTEP, I really got to know him. And me being an adult as opposed to know everything 17 to 21-year-old kid. And I didn't realize what impact he really had on me. And I say I'm going to tell the story backwards because Coach Haskins and I never really saw eye to eye. I tell people, all the time, individually, UTEP was probably the worst choice in the world. But team-wise, I couldn't have made a better choice. And if I had to do it all over again, it's not so much because of Coach Floyd's salesmanship, I would have still chosen to go to UTEP, but Coach Haskins, is still his traits. The thing about being on time. I have a thing in my work career, management career. I really couldn't deal with employees coming late because coming late was not an option. And like I said, if practice was at 3, you need to be there at 2. Otherwise, you're considered late. And just the fact that in my work life, it's all about effort. You're going to get out what you put into it. So if there's no effort, and he was really a good person. I'll tell one little last story. I was at one of the reunions, and someone tried to come interview him, and he just shooed him off. And I'm like, darn, Coach, you haven't changed at all. He said, was I really that bad? I said, yes. He said, well, go find the reporter and tell him I'll do the interview. And he did. But it was just such a pleasure to visit with him, in 20 years after my playing days, to introduce my son to him and what have you. He was truly a blessing. In addition to that guy over there on the Zoom to my right, Tim Floyd, I'll talk about him a little later, but Coach Haskins was really very important in my life, and I love him to death. Wouldn't think I would ever say that. I tell the stories that no matter what year it was, everyone hated him. But truly, it wasn't really a word of hate. We really loved him, but it was hard to admit it when you're 20 years old.
Well, Saint, I think also I had that same experience. Like I said, to know Coach, when John Teicher and I were broadcasting, I didn't know Coach this way, but I got a chance to hang out with him after the game and kind of hang out with him and in certain settings, maybe a bar or something like that, restaurant bar, and watch people just gather around, how people just flocked to him and loved him. And he could tell stories. I mean, what a great storyteller he was. And just, the place would go quiet just to watch him or listen to him tell stories. Now, he had some great stories, and I'm not going to share all those or any of those stories with you guys, but because I guess we're going to share this on the internet. But still, it's funny as heck, though. Just funny as heck, though.
Hey, I want to interrupt, Taisha, quickly before I get left out. I want to tell you a story, and it goes back to old Jeff Robeson. Jeff and I he was on that team that just passed away. My best friend, my best man at my wedding, grew up knowing him ever since I was 14. Tim Floyd, when he came to Houston, he recruited all 3 of us. Jeff went to New Mexico and junior college, and Ricky and I came here. But the night before, we were in the hotel getting ready to sign with University of Houston. And if it wasn't for Jeff coming to that hotel and Tim Floyd coming there and then asking us, at least if you all probably not going to sign, at least you can go and tell Coach Haskins. Well, we all are in sales, right? A lot of us, our career in sales. I am now, Soup, Paul, we all. And I remember an interview I got when Tim Floyd got the job with Chicago. And they asked me, what can you say about Tim Floyd? And Tim Floyd, what did I tell him you were? What did I tell him? Tim Floyd
You
was the
said I
best
could
coach.
sweep.
What I tell him, Tim?
All I know is it was in dark print in the Chicago Tribune, and it said Tim Floyd could sweet talk a dog off a meat truck. but let me say this while we're on that story. There's a lot more to that story. Okay, I spent 22 days a month out of 30 for 4 consecutive months. The first year I'm working for Coach Haskins, trying to sign Fred and Ricky Thompson, those 2 guys. Okay, period. And Coach Haskins said, "Is Houston recruiting them?" I said, no. He said, "Well, they must not be good enough." I said, "No, they're plenty good enough." Well, so he said, "Well, you better get them if you're spending that much of our budget down there." And Beverly was baking them brownies and taking them down there. And Houston's nowhere around. Can't find them. Last day before National Signing Day, Coach Haskins is flying in for the first time, and we're going to sign him the next day. Okay. Houston showed up at the school and kidnapped them and put them in a hotel, and I can't find them to introduce them to Coach Haskins. I'm saying I'm getting ready to get fired. This is over. It's done with. So Roberson, who was a good player, but not a great player, I went and found Roberson and said, "Jeff, all you got to do is go find those 2 guys in a hotel and get them to Fred's house, okay? And you've got a full scholarship at UTEP the next year." And I said, "You better have them there by 7 o'clock," because I couldn't find them. Nobody knew where they were. And they're going to sign with Guy Lewis the next day, and he was going to play with Drexler and Akeem and all those guys. So I went and bought a bottle of Hennessy and took it to Fred Reynolds' dad's house. And we were sitting there in his house. Yeah. And we started drinking Hennessy with your dad. And then all of a sudden, here comes Fred, here comes Ricky, here comes Jeff Roberson. And by then, Fred's dad was a little liquored up. Coach Haskins was a little liquored up. I was. And Fred's dad said, "You're not going anywhere but the University of Texas, El Paso." And that was
the best choice I never made.
And that's the rest of the story. That's the rest.
So, your turn, Coach Haskins.
Oh, what's that, Tice? That's me? I'm up?
Yeah, your turn, Coach Haskins.
Okay, well, first I want to go back a little bit and just personally thank Coach Floyd. Coach Floyd, if it wasn't for you, none of us would be together in the 80s. I mean, you put your heart and soul into this whole team, and now we're brothers for life. But just on Coach Haskins, and I'm going to back up a little bit, because normally when you go on a recruiting trip to any university, college, the coaches usually set you up with a tenured player to show you around campus, show you around school, because I was 17 years old. So, of course, Floyd set me up with Mr. Fred Reynolds. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Floyd set me up with Fred Reynolds. So Fred took me, and it was during the week that they were playing Utah and BYU. So as Floyd telling me the position is Fred playing, that's going to be your position. And I'm watching Fred on the court just dunking on everybody, jumping over everybody's head. And I'm only 17 years old. Now, of course, I didn't have the confidence I got today. And I'm looking at Coach like, so I got to compete for that position? So that was a story on Fred Reynolds. But this meeting Coach Haskins for the first time, 17 years old, the first thing Coach said to me was, we're glad you're going to be signing with us. And I'm telling you one thing now. You can forget about the holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's all for me. You will not be celebrating these holidays. So, of course, I'm calling home almost in tears saying I'm not going to see my family during the holidays. But Coach Haskins has taught me so much, not only as a player, but as an adult, on and off the court. He taught us discipline. He taught us not only holding ourselves accountable, but holding others accountable. And it was just the type of person he was. And I know some of the fellas mentioned getting to know Coach even better after we played for him. And that was even better because we really got to know the true coach. I mean, and I know some of the guys, you know, we had a nickname for Coach Haskins, and his nickname was Fatty. But nobody had the courage to call that to his face.
Hey, we have a nickname for Tim Floyd too.
Yes,
Hey, 1, 2, 3. Tiger Mouth. That's what we call Tiger Mouth.
What?
But
What was it?
You've never heard this, Coach. You never heard this before?
No,
Coach, you never heard the nickname we had for you?
no.
It was Tiger Mouth.
Oh, okay,
Tiger Mouth.
but who's going to explain to him what that nickname meant? Don't leave it to me. I guess it's going to have to be me to tell him why that was the nickname, right?
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Let's go. Tyson, move this program along.
No, Tyson. No. Now that he brought it up, well, you know, Coach Floyd had a tendency to get real excited on the bench until Coach Haskins tell him to sit down. So when he get up, he's spewing, he's yelling at the people on the court, spit flying everywhere. Get back on defense. Whoosh.
Oh, man. Hey, Saint, what was that classic one about abusing?
He abused the privilege.
Tell that story. You got to hear this one. Oh my God.
Which one?
About when Haskins asked him, what do you call that?
Abusing the privilege?
Yeah, Tim Floyd said
Abusing the privilege.
Oh, we still laugh about that. That's another story. Oh man.
Okay.
But
Keys.
I got one more story about Coach Haskins, and this is the thing that you hold all high respect for. Coach Haskins and Tim Floyd went on a recruiting trip during one of our practices, and the coach that he left in charge was he rest in peace, but Coach Forbes, Jim Forbes.
Oh, boy.
And it was the one day at practice Coach Haskins wasn't there. So we as players, I mean, we're kids. We from 17 to 21. We thought, you know, we could have a lax day. So we all decided to disrespect Coach Forbes and not do what he was saying and not run hard, not practice hard. And I never forget when Coach Haskins returned for our next day at practice, we realized no basketball came out to the gym. Normally you go in the gym, you see the balls, you see the basketballs. But this particular day, there was not one basketball on the court. Coach Haskins put us all in a little group and he said, well, I heard about what y'all did to my assistant. So what we're going to do today is we're going to run suicides all day. I lost counts how many times we ran suicide. And Coach mentioned if you don't want to do it, you could take your bag and go home. And it was the worst practice of my life, but it taught us a lesson. It taught me a value lesson that I still live by today. Respect authority. Respect authority. But I love Coach Haskins. He was a father to all of us.
Yeah.
That's all I got for Coach.
Fellas, we got about a half hour left, and there's a lot still to get to. But Cheese, I wanted to let you have the opportunity to talk about Coach Haskins, and then Ham, you'll have the final word.
Well, I think everybody's done a really good job of summarizing Coach Haskins. Coach Haskins, to me, was twofold. He reaffirmed my character, which is today, which is plain spoken. You say it like you mean it. You speak what's on your mind. You don't beat around the bush. And that's kind of what I've taken into my business career and the way I raise my children. The second, thing that Coach Haskins was the unsaid things: his body language, his the way he would give you a nod coming out of a timeout, like, "Hey, it's your time." The way he would use his program, he'd roll it up in a little, I guess his samurai sword or something. I don't know what the hell he was doing, but he would roll up his program and kind of, you'd see him hit it over his leg or something along those lines. It told you that, he's not happy with the way things were going on the court. And, you just, after 4 years, you pick up on the body language when you feel like things were going good, things weren't going so good. He didn't have to, scream and holler at that time. And, my freshman year, I just was browbeat into the ground. But by the time I was a senior, he didn't say diddly to me. He just let me go out and do what I needed to do. And, I just remember timeouts where he would just give me a nod and I'd be like, okay, I need to go out there and, hit a couple shots or help the guys get us around the corner or whatever. And that's my takeaway. And I've also used that in my business career as well, is that the guys know what I mean by the way I look and, my body language. And I think that that's one of the things that he was really good at.
Ham, if you're still with us, you got the last word on Coach Haskins. You still with us? All right, it looks like we might have lost Ham, at least for the time being. Tim, as you mentioned earlier, this was a team that won its first 15 games, was ranked in the top 5 in the country. This team finished the year unbeaten at home, 21-0. You remember that, fellas? The average home attendance that year was 11,568. A school record 11 sellouts on the season. 7 of the 8 Western Athletic Conference games were sellouts. The team played to 95% of capacity during the home schedule during that 83-84 season. So it's truly exceptional. I want to talk about several of the games during that season. The Miners opened at home with wins over Texas Southern and New Mexico State, and then played at the Pan American Center. And as you'll remember, guys, back at that time, not only was the Haskins Center full quite often, but the Pan American Center was too, certainly when the Miners were there. This game this year finished 60-59 and went double overtime. Paul Cunningham, as I recall, you tipped in the game winner in double overtime. Am I wrong?
I finally got a pass. But no, it was a tip in. Yeah, you're right. I do remember that. But I do have to add, who was telling the story? I think it was Cheese. Maybe you were telling the story, Dave, and how Coach had a way of humbling you, or maybe it was Pony that said, you never get too far ahead. I think after we got back to El Paso the next day in practice, I had stolen the ball, went down the court. Guards are telling me to pass them the ball, but I had my mind made up. I was going to go to the basket. Coach said, next time y'all see him do that, tackle him. Because I had no business dribbling the basketball. Was not a ball handler.
That was against Arizona State, wasn't it, Paul?
No, that was against New Mexico State.
Oh,
but it probably did happen again against Arizona.
They remember another time. You did it twice.
I should have passed it.
2 games later, Indiana came to the Don Haskins Center, and the Miners won that game 65-61. And you held Steve Alford to 3 points. He took only 5 shots in that game, and the Miners turned the ball over only 3 times in that game. Who remembers that Indiana game?
All of us, I'm quite sure.
I do.
Nationally televised game.
Yeah.
And I think we were down pretty bad at halftime.
Well, Steve Alford actually reminded me of it. He was at University of Iowa, and he was recruiting my kid, Casey Cunningham. And oddly enough, on the recruiting trip, he brought out
Who did Casey go? Who did Casey end up going to play for in college?
You know, man, he had a tough career at USC. Played for a guy named Coach Tim Floyd.
Good. Go ahead. Finish your story. I'm sorry.
Came like a thief in the night of thieves.
Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, Steve pulls out the stat sheet of that game and reminds me, and he shows me what he scored. He said, "Boy, I must have had an off night." And I'm just going, really? You want to bring that up? I mean, the UTEP Indiana game. So yeah, it was just odd that he would bring it up on a recruit trip for my kid.
Pony, you were feeling it against Indiana, 8 out of 12 in that game. You remember it?
Yes, I do. It was a game where, guys like Kent, Dave, Fred, and Paul, really all the teammates made the game easy for me because I was always the recipient of someone else passing it to me, them guys setting screens for me. So, it was a great shooting night for me, but I have to give them all the credit. It was great coaching on Coach Floyd, Coach Haskins' part, as well as the other coaching staff. I just had to go out there and actually have a good night of shooting.
2 games later, Louisiana Tech came into the Don Haskins Center, and the mailman, Carl Malone, was playing for the Bulldogs back then. Who remembers what it was like to play against Carl Malone, the great Carl Malone in college?
Oh, definitely. It was funny because I remember in the locker room, that was one of the things, we get prepared for the game, and Coach was telling us how good a player. I'd never heard of the guy, and I'm not sure how highly touted he was, but he was definitely bulletin board material. They were telling us, you got to guard this guy. You're going to have a tough night. This guy's going to put some work in on it. And he probably did. I don't know what he scored in that game, but Karl Malone was the real deal.
Cheese, did he lean on you a little bit?
Well, yeah, they had a couple. They just didn't have Karl Malone. They had a really nice squad, and I just remember the guard driving up the left side of the court, and he threw it up, and I was running back on defense with Juden, and I said, this ball's going out of bounds. There's no way anybody can rise up and get this ball. And then Karl Malone grabbed it way up there and did a reverse dunk on Juden, and Juden was pissed off the rest of the game, and he really locked down after that. But that's what I remember about that game.
The very next.
Hey, John, I just want to throw in on that. La Tech's where I went to school, and that La Tech team ended up going to the Elite Eight and got beat by Oklahoma. Karl Malone had a shot, roll around, and go out. They got beat 83-82 in the regional finals to go to the Final Four. That was a great La Tech team. They had a big 6'11" center named Willie Simmons, and Oklahoma had Wayman Tisdale and a great group, but they were stacked, and that was a great win. I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot about playing them that year.
82-70, the Miners won that game. Very next game was at Arizona State. The Miners held the Sun Devils 14 points in the first half, wound up winning 60-55. And what was notable about that one, fellas, I'm sure you'll all remember, it was Coach Haskins' 400th career victory. Remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the game I was saying. Paul drove it up and dunked the ball. I was like, man, that's looking like James Worthy there, Paul.
Geez, I wasn't going to get it back if I passed it, so I had to keep it. So it was just one of those things. Anytime I got it, I'm like, I got to finish this thing.
The Sun Bowl tournament was next, and this was an epic tournament because you had 15th ranked Michigan along with Arizona, and I think Texas Tech was the 4th team in the tournament. Miners beat the Wolverines 72-71, and that was a Michigan team that had Tim McCormick, they had Roy Tarpley, they had Anton Jobert. Fred, you made 2 free throws with 6 seconds left to put the Miners in the championship game. You remember it?
Yes. I mean, it was that was a battle. But what I do remember was how their players, at that I guess we have a dinner or lunch the night before, and they have all the teams there present, and they talk about the season, about their teams. And I remember that those Michigan guys were just thinking they were just going to show up and, it was going to be easy. Many of them just didn't understand how tough it was. And all that did was just make us a little bit angry. And I just tell you, we just had a great group of guys. And Tim Flo, you probably don't remember this. What was so key for us in those games and that year, we played a 1-2-2. And we always had a guy in front, and those guys on the backside would always help out. And we had good 6'5", 6'6" guys on those back ends, and Dave when he there too. But that was key for us, those defenses, and that was great for a lot of quick guys, and we had such a quick team.
Arizona the next night in the championship game, Miners were down 5 with just over a minute left in regulation. Fred, you made a 3-point play. And then Juden and Pony had baskets as well. The game went to overtime, and the Miners beat the Arizona Wildcats. Steve Kerr and Pete Williams among those who were Wildcats at the time, 51-49. Fred, you were the tournament MVP. Pony, I know you made the all-tournament team. What do you remember about that Arizona game? Pony?
Always the Sun Bowl tournament, during the times that the years that I was there, it was always a tough tournament. And, the committee was always able to get quality teams there. But it was a huge, huge win for us, beating Michigan and then turning around the next night, beating Arizona. It was just a very tough win for us. But again, we have to give all the credit, or give a lot of the credit to the teammates, to my teammates, as well as to the UTEP coaching staff. The one thing I can say during my years there, John, and I'm not just saying this because Tim is on the call, on the Zoom call, is the coaching staff always prepared you for a game. It wasn't any second guess to what the game plan was. And Coach Haskins felt like, if it was a 1 or 2 point game within the last 2 minutes, just to give ourselves an opportunity to win, we had a pretty good chance. And even when you're watching today's sporting events, most of the games, the NBA games, college games, come down to the last 2 minutes of the game. And that's what I've alluded to earlier, is Coach Haskins was well beyond his time in preparing you just to give yourself an opportunity to win a game. And we're very fortunate back in the day to have him as our coach and our leader.
Hey, Ham, I see you're back with us. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about what it meant to you to play for Coach Haskins.
Well, first of all, guys, I apologize. I had to run out real quick, but obviously I'm back. It was just a pleasure to play for Coach Haskins. As everybody already said, it kind of started with Tim. Tim was the recruit.
A pleasure? A pleasure?
No, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kev.
PC. All right. No, it's all good. No, but it all started with Tim, man. Tim was, I listened to you guys' stories about Tim, and Tim just kind of must have mastered the way of recruiting, because I think he treated us all the same, like we were all his favorite. I thought I was his favorite, but I realized that I was his favorite. So, but it all started there. And when I got to UTEP and got to be around Coach Haskins, like you guys had mentioned, it was just so much discipline, organization, which was, coming from the city, those were things that, guys like me needed, even though I grew up, with my parents being disciplinarians and sisters and brothers and so forth. But to be able to leave from home and transition to a place like UTEP, where you had somebody like Coach Haskins, who was like a father figure to most of us, and you had the guidance with him, Tim Floyd, Jim Forbes, just everybody just kind of worked well together to make us all better. And so, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the discipline. I enjoyed the hard work. I enjoyed being able to be around you guys because you guys all pushed me, like Coach Haskins was pushing all of us. So I just enjoyed it. My 4 years there was, it was second to none. I'm glad I chose UTEP. I'm glad I was able to be around Coach Haskins for the amount of time that I was. And like some of you guys had mentioned, it was truly after playing for him that you could really appreciate his essence and the values that he taught you. Because, when you're 18 years old, becoming young men, you don't understand some of the core values that someone like Coach Haskins can brings to you. And now we all see it, that we give it to our kids and our children, and we teach them some of the values that we learned from him. And so those are things that I remember about him and I appreciated about him. So, that's basically what my feelings was about Coach Haskins.
Shortly after winning the Sun Bowl tournament, the Miners opened Western Athletic Conference play, beat Air Force, San Diego State, and Hawaii at home. And that took the Miners to 15-0. And the Miners would go to Moby Gym in Fort Collins, Colorado to play Colorado State. And really the first blip on the schedule that day, guys. It was 23-all at the half. And the Miners lost that game 63-51. Who remembers the feeling after that game, after winning your first 15 to suffer your first setback?
I can speak on that one, John. There was something weird about that evening, that day. I wasn't really surprised that we lost. It was a weird feeling playing Colorado State for some reason, that particular game.
I remember the fans after the game rushing the court like they just won the national championship, and how that boiled my blood. And I knew we were playing Wyoming the next night, and I remember the focus during the drive up there. I was riding with Coach Forbes, and I don't think anybody in the van that we were in said a word. And I could tell, after that big disappointment, I think we were all a little too chesty going into that game. But the game we won against Wyoming, which Wyoming up there in Laramie, I mean, that's going to be a war. And if you look at the statistics, it wasn't to the last minute of the game. I think there was like 25 seconds left. We had 0 turnovers in that game, and Paul, who shouldn't have been dribbling anyway,
Yes,
it off his foot.
Yes.
You remember that, Paul, so Coach Haskins was right. We could have had a no turnover game.
Exactly.
It was the most perfect game that I've ever been a part of in my entire career.
Hey, what did it say about you fellas that after losing at Colorado State that you were able to bounce back and win not only at Wyoming but then again at Air Force, which was always a tough place to play? So that Colorado State game was just the first game of 3 straight on the road in league play, and you were able to bounce back and win the next 2. What did that say about you guys?
Well, I would like to say, I mean, at that point we were 15-0, and everywhere we were going to go, and I guess a few games before, hell, we were going to get the best out of everyone. We were going to show, I mean, a team could have, Colorado, that probably the best they played that game. And it's just sometimes you show up and no matter what you do, you're going to get their best every time. And, I mean, we could have just, pouted and just went up to Laramie and got blew out. But, like you said, we didn't have to get into a big old hurrah with one another. Hell, we knew we lost and we knew what we had to do.
So you won those 2 last games, and then the next Saturday, a 4th straight road game, and the reward was $18,000 waiting for you at the pit. The Miners were down 10 points with 11 minutes to go, and Lester Goodwin hit a shot at the top of the circle. I'll never forget it, with 6 seconds left, and the Miners beat the Lobos 60-59. Pony, talk about it.
Well, to this day, I don't realize what they were thinking about. You know, that was probably one of my favorite areas to shoot the ball from. And when I came down the court, no one was guarding me. And, you know, it was just a perfect opportunity. Again, I just have to give credit to my teammates as well as the coaching staff to give me the confidence to take that shot. I was fortunate enough to make it, but I think, you know, even if I'd have missed it, I think the teammates as well as coach would have been willing to deal with that, because that was one of my favorite areas to shoot the ball from.
Pony,
that was a layup.
Yeah.
Wait, is that Pony talking?
Hey, look.
You know, Mr.
Hey.
Woo, 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 woo. You know, he's going to tell you to pass him the ball. So you know, you got to get him the ball. He's over there whooping in the corner, asking for it. But, guys, I got to tell you, I'm here in Albuquerque, Lobo country, and anytime I'm out in the public and people ask me about playing basketball, of course, I mention UTEP, and they say how tough we were. And Lobo fans love us, man. They even still talk about Soup and the cup incident. But I just got to tell you guys that, man, you know, I run across the Lobo players, man, all they talk about is how tough we were. So, you know, just, you know, great job teammates, great job coaches. The whole thing, I mean, it's just, you know, well respected. And I can't, you know, also I got to give credit to our fans, man. The fans were huge. Nothing like UTEP fans. I don't see, you know, when we played, I thought the Lobo fans were always a tough place to play, loud, raucous. You hear half-pint bottles dropping after the national anthem. I didn't know what that was all about, but I mean, but UTEP fans top it all. I mean, the fans in El Paso are just something special. You don't see that anymore.
No, not anymore.
Fellas, after that game at New Mexico, I think the Miners came home after that and won a couple of games. And then you went to San Diego State, and that was a heck of a San Diego State team. Michael Cage, Leonard Allen, Anthony Watson, a very, very talented San Diego State team. And the Miners suffered their second loss of the year there. Who remembers that one?
I do, because I still got Jerry curl juice on my shoulder from trying to guard Michael Cage. That cat was so wide. He was tough, but he was wide, man. You know, those guys, you know, San Diego State was good. And you had to tip your hat to them. But, you know, it was just one of those things. Losing to them, it was, you know, it was due. You know, we didn't want to lose, of course, but, you know, they just outplayed us on that day. But I think at the end of the day, we came out on top of the conference tournament and everything else. So, you know, that's just when you're playing a long season and then trying to sustain a level of play for 20-something games, you know, it's just tough. And I think we can all agree that it's tough. But, you know, I think to come out of there, 20-2 at that point of the season, come on, man, that's great.
And
So,
the only other game you'd lose during the regular season would be at BYU, 83-65. Fred, you mentioned Devin Durant. 23,000 people watched that game at the Marriott Center. What was it like to play before 23,000 fans?
You know, they say 23,000. It was nothing like the pit. I mean, they were a quiet 23,000. I mean, that's how I always saw it. I mean, you go into, and not to get off what you're saying, you go in, it was just, you could feel that pit. You could feel the crowd and the noise in that place. I never felt like BYU was this a loud 23,000. Maybe you other guys could
No, the pit's something special. I mean, they had the student body section sitting behind the bench, and they were loud, you know, and the band was right there in the corner, and it was all bumping. I think they used to compare it to something like louder than a jet airplane, something like that.
Oh man. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Fellas, we've got only about 7 minutes or so left, so I do want to get to a couple of other things. that spring, the Miners won the regular season in the Western Athletic Conference, and that year was the first ever Western Athletic Conference tournament. There had not been a postseason tournament prior to that 1983-84 season. The Miners, as the regular season champs, got to host. You beat Wyoming 62-55 to reach the championship game, and then a classic against New Mexico. The final score, and again, pre-shot clock era in college basketball, 44-38 over the Lobos. Juden Smith was the MVP of the tournament. Who remembers, who can give us some reflection on that first ever Western Athletic Conference tournament?
I remember when I used to listen and Coach would always say how tough it was to beat a team 3 times in a row. And but we were able to beat those teams. You may not remember, Tyson. Do you remember that the game prior in the semifinals? You remember it was BYU and the Lobos. Do you remember what uniforms the Lobos played in?
Yeah, they were wearing Miner road jerseys, weren't they?
Yeah, I think that was planned, I think, but it worked out for them anyway.
Yeah.
But we won it. I don't know if a team ever won the whole. Did that ever happen again? Win the conference and then win the tournament?
Yeah, I'm sure the Miners did it again. I'm sure the Miners did it because that was the string of 5 straight WAC championships Miners won. So I'm sure that UTEP, in fact, the very next year, Miners won the regular season, and we went up to Laramie and won the conference tournament championship, as you guys will remember. Guys, I got to bring up.
The crowd was incredible.
Yeah,
the crowd was incredible.
Obviously, UNLV, you played in Salt Lake City in the NC2A tournament. Both teams got a bye into the second round. It was a 4 seed against a 5 seed. Again, we've only got about 5 minutes. Who's got some reflection on that game?
Well, my recollection of that game was that it's a game of momentum, and I felt like we had our foot on the gas and we were running away with the game, and I felt like everybody was hitting on all cylinders on our end. And I think if I have to, critique it the way I feel about it, it's all I can say is that I thought that we made a misjudgment on the bench and pulled us into a half-court situation and slowed the ball down, and we ended up losing that momentum. And a lot of the guys, I just remember coming out of the timeout and the guys looking at each other going, what in the world? We're about to blow these guys off the court. And we ended up giving them an opportunity to get back in the game the second half, which has not set right with me for 40 years.
Please, I thought you were going to say, Coach put me in, and that was the reason why. Another turnover.
Yeah, that was a disappointing. I felt we were such on a roll, and it was, those are games that stay with you. Of course, you just wonder what it could have been, because gosh, I really thought we had a good chance to go a little further. Can't take anything away from UNLV that they did what they needed to do. Also,
guys, you all have talked about how special it was to play in the Don Haskins Center. Of course, I talked about the great fan turnout in particular that season. Let me bring up a name, and I want a couple of you to comment. Again, we've only got a couple of minutes, but a big part of the environment in the Don Haskins Center, as you'll all remember back then, had to do with the Strels, Paul Strelson. Who's got a comment?
The best announcer in college basketball, home court announcer back in those days.
I would just say the greatest PA announcer that I was ever around in the 42 years that I coached. And the first thing I did when I went back to UTEP was demand that we bring Strels back and put him there. No offense to Jeff Lindbergh, but because Jeff did a great job, but nobody could create an atmosphere like the Strels.
I agree with that, Coach. he did a really good job. And if you guys remember, it was have a little SFD, stand for defense.
Right.
And a lot of times I'd look up at the clock and they'd finally score with 12 minutes to go in the half, and the fans were pretty much exhausted and would just flop into their seats because they didn't want to stand anymore, especially when we played a team that, with our swarming defense, it made it really tough on the opponents to score. And Strelzin was on, and the band would get behind it. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Right.
Yeah, I remember
Stand for
that.
defense.
Yeah, stand for defense, but that was really cool.
I thought he provided a lot of energy. He was very energetic throughout the entire game. I think he provided the majority of us with some nicknames that didn't come to UTEP with the nickname, but just a lot of passion. He had a lot of passion for what he did, and he provided a lot of energy. But he was truly the best.
Fellas, we could go on for hours, but we're out of time. I want to thank you fellas. I want to thank Keith King and Jeff Darby of UTEP Athletics for their help. These are memories that will never die. Thanks in large part to you fellas, and certainly appreciate you doing this and what you have meant over the years to UTEP basketball and UTEP athletics. And for those of you watching and listening, thank you for doing so, and thank you for viewing this UTEP Athletics presentation. So long, everybody.